Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi, Scalable Investors. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to tell you about a group that I'm a part of called HiveMind. If you're serious about taking the next step in your real estate investing career, then this is definitely a group that you need to join. Some of our members are making $90,000 and more per month, and as much as $300,000 on just one deal. And at the same time, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars like you typically would joining other mastermind groups. This is only $99 per month. And when you join, you'll gain access to a robust integrated CRM software that allows you to track your leads, run automated triggers, and ultimately scale your marketing efforts. So the difference here is that you're not left high and dry, but gain access to a support network that allows you to use that tool and learn from other more experienced real estate investors. So to learn more, go to scalablerei.com/hivemind. That's HIVEMIND. Thanks a lot. Let's get into the episode. Hi, Scalable Investors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today we have with us Lazaro Vento, who is the Managing Director of Happy Travels Miami, one of the most profitable Airbnb empires in the business. They have 115 Airbnb units and also has 22 cars in his Turo portfolio. So really excited to have him on the show to get into some of this really interesting niche part of real estate and other ways of making money. So Lazaro, what's going on? How are you doing today?
Well, we're here. We made it.
That's right. Another week under the belt.
And we made it. Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks. We're it's good that you're scalable, because that's kind of what we've been doing, right? I've been traveling a lot to Tampa lately. I leave again next week. We've been averaging about five new apartments every 2 weeks over there. So it's definitely an operation.
Okay, that's great. It sounds like there's just constant improvement. I think one of the hardest things of any business is just being consistent. And if you're consistently adding 5 units each week, that's great. So why don't we back up a little bit though? How did you stumble across this, and what brought you into real estate? What was your journey to get you to today?
Well, it certainly wasn't easy. I'll tell you that much. We've been doing this now for 7 years. 7 years ago, I was in sales. I worked for Rolls-Royce and Bugatti in Miami, and I have been doing that since I was 20 years old, or 21. That's kind of like a lifelong position. But by the time I got into my 30s, being in that job, I kind of was disheartened by it, and I was looking for something else for sure, because all the guys around me, there's a lot of guys in their 60s, they've been divorced 3 or 4 times, and it's just not something that I wanted. And so I started kind of like on that entrepreneur journey. I started like reading books and doing different things to try to figure out how to get out of this job that I was kind of stuck in, because I was making a lot of money, $400,000 a year. And that type of income is hard to replace, as you could imagine. So I started just reading books, and I came across The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I don't know if you read that book, but it kind of like struck a chord with me about like taking some kind of risk, some kind of chance. And there's a part that's like, what's the worst that could happen? You can always go back. There's like an episode on that book about the lawyer that he quits his job, and he's like, well, I could always go back to being a lawyer, but I could never like do this adventure again. So it's kind of like what I did. I read the book, and a few weeks later, I just decided to quit my job, and I decided I was going to open up a cigar shop, of all things. And I really didn't have much experience in it, but I had, up to that point, I had had success in a lot of little endeavors that I had gotten into, and I thought, well, I was overconfident, I think, in my abilities of running a retail operation like that. And I felt, at that point, I felt I was financially like bulletproof. I had like $2 million in the bank. So I figured, what's the worst that could happen? I'm never gonna go burn through $2 million, and that's kind of exactly what happened. We burned through my entire life savings, and then some. Because then you burn through that, and then you start getting in debt, and all of a sudden all my cars got repossessed, and I wound up getting evicted, and it was a mess. But during that time, in the cigar shop, there was a customer that was one of my only customers, probably, to be honest with you. But he was a regular, and he was moving from Indiana, and he was looking to buy a property, and I had my real estate license, so he was kind of throwing me a bone so I could make a few bucks. And we find a property. Well, I helped him find a property that was like a two unit on one lot situation, so two houses on one lot, like a duplex situation. And at that point, I was like, well, I mean, this guy's a friend of mine, and he doesn't know this area like I do. I thought I knew more than him. And I'm like, this is a bad neighborhood, man. I'd love to make the commission, but the guy became kind of my friend. That I was trying to talk him out of the deal, and he's like, well, the reason was to get the property, we had to pay the tenants that were there $5,000 to move out. And I'm like, you're not going to do any better than these guys. I mean, the people that are in this neighborhood, this is kind of what you're going to get. And that's when he told me, well, I'm not going to actually rent this place to anybody. I'm going to put it on this thing called Airbnb. And I'm like, what is that? I had never heard of it at that point. And he because he was a little younger than me, and he's a bit more traveled than I was at that point. He was like an early adapter. So he had been to Vietnam and all these other places using Airbnb. And he said, well, I've done some research, and there's very few Airbnbs in Miami at that point. So he says, I think they're going to do very well. And I'm like, well, I guess if you're not going to get tenants, that makes sense. And I thought about it a little bit more. He's a smart guy, so I did a little bit more research. And at that point, I found an article about a guy in New York that at that point, he was an early player too. He was making about $1 million a year on the platform. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. I could definitely use that. At this point, I was sleeping on an air mattress in a friend's spare bedroom. And I was like, this is looks like something serious. And before anybody there was no articles about arbitrage, which is now like a key term in this business, where you're renting something and then putting it on the platform. And the only reason I came about it is because my credit was jacked up. I couldn't buy anything. I didn't have a lot of money. And I told my wife, if we're able to find a house that has a secondary structure, just like the one that I just sold my buddy Fred, maybe we could, live for free, maybe, and that'll buy us some time, and maybe the cigar shop thing turns into something. And that's kind of how I wound up doing Airbnb. So I find this house in that same neighborhood, and at that point I realized there was quite a few houses like that in that neighborhood. It's just the way they were building them, and I was able to rent a place and put it on the platform. And within 15 minutes, I got a reservation that was $1,000 over my total expenses, including the rent and water and everything else. And I was like, wow, now we got ourselves a business, we could live for free, and we're actually making a little bit of money. So that's how I stumbled upon the Airbnb business, is that particular scenario right there.
Okay, so you hit on it a little bit, this Airbnb arbitrage. You're renting out something, and then you're basically committing to a monthly lease, or I guess an annual lease. You're paying monthly, and then you're just doing these micro leases on Airbnb, on a per night basis.
Yes, sir.
And that's it. You're just collecting that spread. So on a daily basis, you're getting more than you're actually paying. I guess overall in the month, you're trying to get more money than you actually are paying on it, and then get that arbitrage profit. Exactly.
And at that point, there was just so few Airbnbs that anything you would put up, it would rent for a lot, because it was kind of people were enamored with the idea. So you would see a lot of early adapters that they would you'd put it for something like that. I would put it for $100 a night or 125, and people would book it at, like on a 30-day rental, like through Airbnb, and all of a sudden your rent was only like $2,000 on that the whole property, and you just collected $3,700 or something. So definitely, and the fees. The other thing is, at that point also Airbnb they weren't collecting like tourist taxes and all this other stuff. So to the traveler, it seemed like it was so much cheaper than a hotel, because like when you rent at a hotel, there's like all these other taxes and stuff. It ends up being like 25% more. So the people that were in the know, they were like, well, I'm getting like a whole house somewhere for 30% less anyway. So that's one thing that it seemed like a lot of people caught on to early on. And what wound up happening is, instead of just like, I could have just stayed there, but I started like thinking, well, I mean, maybe I should try to figure out, now that I see that this is like a business, and I had done the math. I was like, like that guy in New York, it probably takes about 25 apartments or so to make $1 million in revenue. And I'm like, wonder how he did that. So I started like just calling around. Like anytime I would see a sign, I would call it up. And the first sign I saw was actually a house that was like right next to my house. And I called the landlord up, and I didn't have money to actually rent the place, but I wanted to just call around and see how many people would be willing to do the same thing. And I talked to this guy, and it turned out that he was like a big BMW fan like me, and we kind of struck a friendship. I was trying to like make the guy be friendly with me so I could maybe do a deal with him down the line. And it turned out that he didn't have much to do, so he actually came by to meet me, and we kind of chit-chatted for a while. And the house actually was already rented to somebody else. But I told him about the business and what I was trying to do, and he told me, if anything changes, that sounds like a good idea. I'll consider doing it with you. And luck would have it, about a week and a half later, like the deal that they had fell apart somehow. And he called me up and told me, hey, you want to still interested in this house? And I'm like, yeah, but I still don't have any cash. And he's like, well, it sounded like you got something there, so I'll give you the keys, and as long as you come up with the money in a couple of weeks, in a reasonable amount of time, I'll let you operate. And that's how I got my second Airbnb, basically with no money out. Well, it was with no money out of pocket. And it turned out that guy, he was a fairly large landlord in the neighborhood. So he had, probably about 100 houses or so, and throughout that whole neighborhood. So he became a good source for my first few deals, because he realized one thing that I learned early on, that I wasn't calling him for maintenance at all. And like anything that was going wrong with the place, I was just fixing myself. And he really liked that, because that's like one of his complaints. And that's one of the reasons why the other deal fell apart, is like these houses aren't brand new. Like that house is like 100 years old. So they have all kinds of little issues and problems that you run into. And he didn't, like, this guy didn't want to spend his whole day fixing houses. So all of a sudden he found a person that was willing to like take on those maintenance items. Like an AC broke, I just fixed it. Anything at first I didn't know how to do any of that. I started just researching it. I figured out how to fix ACs and do small electrical work and stuff. So I was able to like add value to these landlords, because imagine like now you have a built-in tenant that's paying you every month on time and doesn't call you for any maintenance. the perfect tenant.
That's the dream. Yeah. Nice. All right. So you mentioned the fees, like hotels charging fees, extra travel tax, or these other make-believe bullshit taxes. So does Airbnb now do that? Do they tack those on now?
Well, in order to like stay in line with the city, because back in those days, obviously the hotels started catching on that this was becoming big business, so they started like lobbying to try to like outlaw Airbnb. And that happened early on in Miami. And, a bunch of us, I mean, if you look me up, you'll see I was like, they actually threatened to like come after all of us. And it became like a First Amendment case and stuff in the state of Florida, because we all went to like the city hall meeting, and, I promised to say stuff that will get these guys riled up, and they did get riled up. They got mad. Because I think I told them, gentrification of these neighborhoods is good, and that's increasing property value, and that helps the investors. And these guys got worked up when I said that. So because it changes their voter base is what happened, and because you get a bunch of investors that are buying up all these houses in this neighborhood, it's going to change the voter pool, and that's what they were really scared of. So they said they would go after us, and then they created like a case, and Airbnb negotiated with the city, because at the end the city, all they wanted was money, so they negotiated to collect and remit all those same hotel taxes, and that kind of quashed the whole situation. And Airbnb became kind of a gray area in the city of Miami, where there's actually no licensing, and the city is just kind of like there's no real law against it, but it's like a real gray area in the city of Miami. So you could just operate as long as Airbnb continues remitting the taxes on your behalf.
Okay, so that's still the case. You don't have to have license.
No, you don't need a license. There's a state level license that you can get. It's not really a requirement. There are certain neighborhoods and areas that you do need a city, like individual city licenses in certain cities, like in West Palm Beach, we had to get but the license in itself is just a vehicle for them to be able to collect those same taxes. So it was the same thing in like West Palm Beach, just made you like pay $80 to get this license, which then gives them the ability to then you go online and pay them money. And that's all they wanted. And that's the way it is in most communities. There's certain areas like the beach, there's too many hotels there. So the enforcement is really aggressive, and you definitely don't, I don't want to be in that environment, because the fines for operating are steep. They were giving $100,000 fines to people at one point.
Oh, got it. Right.
So you certainly don't want to do that.
That's crazy. Yeah, I remember I was at one point I was helping this hedge fund. They were buying busted loans, so a bank would go under, and the FDIC would come in and auction off these bad loans. And one of the loans was secured by this really nice piece of real estate next to like Jackson Square in New Orleans, on top of a brewery or something. And they were trying to Airbnb it out, but I think there were some issues with that, and so it caused issues with revenue or something. But very interesting stuff. They maybe have had similar issues because of tons of hotels lobbying. I don't know.
Yeah, New Orleans is another one. You're exactly right. New Orleans is another one of those cities that it became very prohibitive against Airbnb, because it was actually one of the most profitable cities. I actually was going to get a house right there in the
French Quarter.
French Quarter, exactly. And it was actually a house with like a parking, which is really rare. It had like a courtyard where you park right in. And
that's really nice.
Yeah, the place was pretty awesome. And
I'll live there now. Anyway, go on.
I'll still live there, trust me. But it ended up being I started doing some research, and the laws were shifting in such a way that it would have been really risky for me. And like you can only do Airbnb a few months out of the year or something. So I'm sure people have figured out a way around it. If you live there, I'm sure you figure out a way around it. But that's not an environment I want to be in.
Got it. Yeah, I wonder if they do some type of house hacking where they're living in that, and so it's like, oh, it's my primary residence. I just have friends over that pay me.
Well, you can that's another thing that I did early on. It's funny you brought up house hacking, because like I was one of like an original poster back on the Deeper Pockets forum, when people were just started talking about house hacking. I was like 8 years ago. I put hey, I'm doing house hacking, and when that property I was telling you about. And what I would do is I figured out that a bunch of the weekends in that neighborhood were worth, in a house like that, were worth like $1,000 a night. So, and I was not just the guest house, which we were originally renting on Airbnb, but the house itself, because the houses were fairly big, these old style kind of mansions. So me and my wife decided we just like set our house up in a way where we could like bolt and at a moment's notice. So we always had our house for rent, like at $1,000 a night. And if anybody like, and we set it up like a 3-night minimum. That way we could like make enough revenue to pay for something else. And what we ended up doing a lot of times is we would just rent Airbnbs like just in Central or Northern Florida. You can find like a nice house with a pool for $100 a night, and you would leave our house and somebody would give us $3,000. And we rinsed and repeated that process a whole bunch of times. That's how we were like funding like the acquisition of new properties. Like we would rent our house 2 or 3 times, and that'll give me like $7,000, and then I could go out and lease another property. And we kept doing that over and over. It was a great house hack, and it worked. Another house hack that we did on that same property is it had a lot of land. So I figured, because that neighborhood's kind of like the Wild West, that nobody would like fine us for like doing crazy stuff. So I wound up buying this tiny house on wheels, and I wound up putting it like it was like the only like tiny house in South Florida at that point. And it was like in an urban setting, because it's like kind of like the hood, like right next to the highway. And I had like a graffiti artist like do all these graffiti and all this stuff, and like it became like one of the most popular Airbnbs on the platform, because it was just something really unique. It was like this weird tiny house. Somebody had spent a lot of money building this thing, and I only paid, I think I paid $1,500 for it, and it's worth like $50,000 now. That tiny house, and it just like somebody had bought this lady, I can't say her name because she's actually pretty famous. She had bought a property in Hollywood, Florida, and this tiny house happened to be on the land. And the city where it was at was fining her $500 a day for that thing being there once she like closed on the property. So she was desperate, so she put it on Facebook Marketplace for like $7,000, which was still like a ridiculous smoking deal. And I showed up. I was the only person that showed up, and I told her I'd give her $1,500 for it. She would have given it to me for free. I think she just needed it off the land. And me and my buddies, we painted it real nice, and we figured out a way to. I paid my neighbor to like take down his fence for a few hours so I could get it into our lot. And then it was there, and it looked like it was always there. Like the city once came and they couldn't figure out how we ever got it in there. So they figured it was always there, and they never, they just went, well, I don't know how they got this thing in here.
Did you have to like pour a slab to put it on?
No, it's a tiny house on wheels. So that house had like a lot of land, kind of like, so imagine like the property line is here, and I asked the neighbor, because the only way to get it in there was like through his backyard. He had like a big giant backyard where he was parking a bunch of cars, and I asked him, hey, if I give you $1,000, will you let me take down your fence completely, and that way I could get this tiny house back there, and then we'll have somebody rebuild your fence, and it'll be like it never happened. And that's what we ended up doing. And I hooked it up to the plumbing in the house, and all I needed was like a hose for water, and I had an electrician put like a plug, and I just plugged it in, and that thing was there for 4 years.
Oh wow! So did you end up like moving out of that house? And
yeah, we wound up moving out of that house. I started making more money. I got a better house, and that tiny house, we wound up having to get it out of there. We wound up having to do the same operation to get it out of there, and it actually wound up in storage for a couple years. And then the same guy, Fred, that turned me on to Airbnb about a year ago, I think. He was asking me, hey, whatever happened to the tiny house? And I told him, well, you want it? And he's like, yeah. I mean, I'm like, you're the only guy I'll probably give it to, because I know you're not gonna like destroy it or trash it. And he's like a real like creative individual. So he took the tiny house and he made it 1,000 times better than it ever was, and it's sitting in his house now, and he's renting it on Airbnb. So it's still generating revenue. Like that $1,500 investment, if you think about how much it generated over that 4 years, and it was averaging about $100 a night, and it was rented 365 days out of the year. So I made like $250,000 renting this thing out or something. And it was one of the best investments I made. I also bought a little trailer too that also did pretty well, like a little Airstream trailer. And that's another like project that I'm probably gonna do soon. I want to get some land, like somewhere cool, like in the desert or something. And I'm gonna do like a bunch of container homes with like a big pool in the middle, and that should be a fun project.
Okay, you said a trailer though?
A trailer.
Yeah, you put in containers on trailers to move them
Well,
around.
no,
How do they relate?
Well, no, I want to put like containers, like container homes on a land like a plot of land, and experiences like that are like really valuable on Airbnb. So if you get like, let's say like you call it like a dude ranch or something, and or like a desert experience, and you put like, let's say 6 container homes, and you build a pool in the middle, and it's like a place for people to congregate. Those spaces are worth stupid money on the platform, because it's more of like just a place to stay. It's an experience.
Huh, okay, interesting. Yeah, we'll have to talk offline about that. That's primarily what I do right now. I flip land, so we could always partner, and I could find the land for you and
that would be fun. Yeah,
sell it to you, or maybe I don't know, we could work out tons of different ways to arrange the deal. So
yeah, that'll be fun. I mean,
cool.
That's kind of like a project that I really want to do soon. In a desert, or maybe close to a lake, anywhere unique where we could do like some weird like campsite that people will come from all over the world to like just check out.
Yeah, it sounds like glamping.
Well, it's kind of like glamping. That is correct. But more, a little bit more, like because tents are cool, and so are yurts and things like that. But like if you get like some cool container homes, like made of glass, like with glass walls and stuff, people will definitely travel from far and wide for something like that.
Yeah, especially like I could imagine some psychedelic drug experiences out in the desert.
Exactly. Now you're talking peyote.
Crazy parties. Yeah, some peyote. Like I'm thinking the Doors, Jimmy Morrison, or whatever. Yeah,
that's exactly it.
I'm the Lizard King. Just remember that. So back to the Airbnb arbitrage. If I was just some guy sitting on my couch listening to this episode and wondering, like, that sounds cool, how can I get started? There's a couple things I would want to get on the table. Like, first, is it just overly saturated now and like the secret's out and there's just too many people doing it? Let's start with that.
Well, I think pre-COVID it was getting a little saturated, but now post-COVID, a lot of people went under. So like even Airbnb says they need another million hosts because they lost a lot of hosts during COVID. But, just a big part of my operation went under during that. Like I lost a 52-unit property during COVID. And not because I couldn't pay it, like the developer just had no stomach for it anymore because of the shutdowns and the implications on some of those leases where government authority, if we can't operate, there's nothing we can do. It becomes like a closed venue until we reopen. So that happened to a lot of companies. There was a company that was actually buying my business. Well, they were trying to buy my business pre-COVID, and they were offering me like $3 million or something. And for that particular portion of my business, that 52-unit hotel, and I turned them down. I felt pretty stupid once we shut down, but now we're still making money, and in the long term, it made sense. And that company was one of the first players to go under during COVID. Their exposure was too high. They had thousands of apartments, and the music stopped, and they couldn't get any more funding. So their company imploded in under 30 days.
That's amazing. Huh. So I guess it's probably starting to ramp back up as some travel starts to pick up and all that.
Yeah, like right now, November, I'm seeing a huge increase, uptick. Like international travel was a problem last year, obviously, because we didn't get much of it. We were getting some COVID tourism. There was a lot of people coming to get the vaccine. So those were good long reservations. But there's certain bread and butter like travel that wasn't happening, like cruise ships and things like that. And that, especially in Miami, that's a big, like once you've been doing it as long as I have, you realize like the cruise ship traffic accounts to like 20 or 25% of your total stays. So because the people, they can't just go on a cruise because there's too much risk of flying in and leaving the same day on your cruise. So everybody flies in a day early or two, and then they go on their cruise. That way, if there's any like mishaps, they don't miss their 14-day cruise. It's like very like recommended by anybody that cruises. That's what they do. Just because there's no room for error. Once the boat is gone, it's gone. So they all have to do the same thing. So we're seeing a rebound in that, and like the data this month, I'm seeing a lot of international travelers, like Booking.com, which Airbnb is like a great site, but we also we operate on multiple platforms, and Booking.com was like a platform that was kind of dormant because they're like customer avatar is usually like European, and since they weren't coming here, and like there weren't very many customers, and all of a sudden, like in the beginning of this month, you just like it exploded again because they opened travel bag. And like now my whole calendar is blue, and blue is Booking.com because they just like there was pent up demand, obviously.
Okay, that's really encouraging. That's great to hear that it's picking up. I think the first thing I would think of, though, if I was like just lock myself into a annual lease, it would be like, what if the owner finds out and they notice that their own place is listed on Airbnb? Do they get fussy about that, or are you just super transparent up front?
You have to be. Like, that's one thing, like from the beginning, that's why I wound up scaling so much, is because like the owners were giving me more properties because they knew that I was doing this, and it was a business. Like most of their tenants were just like people with jobs, and they would always have excuses for paying the rent on time. And me, I'm like, I'm running a company, and I have like, this is like an asset to me. So I'm making sure my rent's paid on time. And the guys that don't make it in this business is the ones who like do exactly that. They like don't tell the landlord, and all of a sudden the guy finds out and you get evicted. It's not something you want to be involved in.
Huh, that's funny. It's like so many things in life, like those limiting beliefs. You think, oh, I can't tell that landlord, or like wholesaling a piece of property. It's like, oh, I don't want to tell this seller that I'm selling their property. Then it actually backfires a lot of times, So you need to do the opposite of what your intuition is telling you, right?
Yeah, a lot of people think, well, maybe I won't tell them, they won't find out. Like in the beginning, I really didn't know how to approach it, but I was like, well, the first thing I came up with was, look, this is the art district. We're bringing in a lot of artists to the neighborhood, and we're renting the places short term to artists. That was kind of like one of our first pitches that actually worked. Because the whole thing is nobody even knew what Airbnb was. So it didn't matter if I told them, hey, I'm doing Airbnb, because they wouldn't know what it was anyways at that point. But they did understand, like when I told them artists and things like that, they did understand that. And that worked in the beginning. And then as more people knew what Airbnb was, we would be like, hey, we do Airbnb. But we also have like our own like client base of artists and travelers and things like that. And that pitch works fairly well.
Yeah, my other question would be like, if you just directly tell them, I'm going to do Airbnb with this property, obviously you benefit because you're getting that consistent monthly rent, and my business is hinging upon this property being available, and I'll be good on the rent. But what if they turn around and say, well, wait a minute, I'll just do Airbnb myself, and puff out their chest? Does that ever happen? And you have to like mark them off the list?
Well, I mean, most of these landlords they don't want to be in the Airbnb business. Like that's the key. Like if you're like a big landlord, do you really want to operate a hotel too? Like really, don't you just rather just collect your rent and be done with it? Do you have housekeepers? Do you have all this other stuff that it takes to run this business? And once they realize that there's a lot more to it than just like collecting rent, most of them, like especially professional investors like that, they don't want any part of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Never really thought of that. It's like, it sounds very synergistic. So that's good. So you've scaled up your business to 115 properties. So how long did that take you, like the full 7 years, or kind of where were you at like after 1 year and 2 years? What was that growth looking like?
Well, in the first, let's say the first year, we we got up to like 7 or 8 properties, right? And I thought that was like all the, I was real happy because it was different. Like now what I'm running is like a real business or like a real company. And back then, like I got to that dream like that I thought about when I read the 4 Hour Work Week. Like I had like this I didn't really have to do much. We had 7 properties, a couple housekeepers, and I could hang out. And my property kind of became like Casablanca. I would just hang out with all these different people from all over the world, and it was kind of a cool thing that for the first like 2 years. And over time, I started wanting like I'm like I want more. I want more. So, and like that's when I started thinking about getting like multiple units in one building because I like from that beginning I realized like my houses were kind of like spread out a little bit and my housekeepers would have to like drive here and drive there. So we said, well, if I could like get like one building with like 20 apartments, like they could just go up and down the elevator and they don't have to drive anywhere, and that makes life a lot easier, and it's easier to scale that way. So about 2.5 years in, we were able to. I met somebody that became my business partner. He was actually he had just come from China, and he stayed in my one of them stayed in my tiny house, and they had come back because they wanted to do glamping and Airbnb and all this stuff. So like we were like meshed, and it was kind of a unique opportunity. We just met like that, and he had his real estate license, and I decided, well, I think this guy will be like a good fit to help me get more units, and because he was really presentable, and I'm like, I need like somebody that will like act as a buffer between me and the owners, so it can make the closing of those type of deals easier, because it's hard for me to like present myself as being the best. I need somebody else to like act as the buffer. Like, hey, yeah, my tenant's the best, and he's gonna pay, and he has this business. I can't just tell you that. It's not quite as believable. So I figured right that he would be a good fit for that. And he wanted to do Airbnb too. So he was really excited about like going after these deals for me, because that way he could know if it worked and he could get some deals for himself. So it was a perfect opportunity for both of us. And I picked up like 20 apartments in that round, and he wound up picking up like 20 himself. And then that's how we came up with our housekeeping company that operates all our units, because housekeeping is actually the biggest barrier to scaling in this business. Is like who's going to clean all those apartments? Like when I had 6 apartments, me and my wife would clean them, and or whatever. And then we hired like 1 maid and then 2 maids. But once you get like a whole stack of them, how do you do it? So you have to create a cleaning company, and there has to be certain procedures. So by year like 4, we were like, between me and him, we were over 150 apartments combined at that point. And one of them was a 52 unit complex that we wound up taking down. That was the biggest deal we ever did. And that was we were already at the point where we had scaled quite a bit, and we were looking for more. And we were kind of shooting the ideas like, hey, how why don't we like, because we had a bunch of apartments in one building, but we're like, what would be easier if we had like a whole floor, like if the whole floor was ours. That would be ideal. Maybe 2 floors. That way, like it makes everything really easy. So we were like looking around, and we wound up like we were actually having like lunch at this taco place, and I look up and there's like a big sign on this building that said like 4 months free rent, and I'm like, well, that's a sign, right? And those guys are desperate. I never seen that before, but that building was brand new, and it was kind of like in an edgy area, and it turned out that they were having a hell of a time leasing this place because of where it was. It was now they have no problem leasing it, but back then it was still like people are going to live here. And even though the building was brand new and had pools and everything, and still they were having a hard time getting people to like move in. So they needed somebody to fill in some of those vacancies. And it turned out they wanted somebody to fill in a lot more than we had anticipated. We were looking for maybe like 20 to 25 units, and they wanted basically somebody to take most of the community, which was 52 apartments. And it was a substantial investment on both our parts. Once again, we were all in, or I was. Because it cost nearly $1 million to put the deal together. And it was very risky because like to do the deal, we knew that we would run out of money and we wouldn't have any buffer in order to pay the first month's rent, which was $140,000. It was the monthly rent for this place. And we had to get creative. Like the way we were able to do it is we negotiated a deal so we would be able to close right before Ultra. So like 4 weeks before Ultra. I don't know if you know what Ultra is. It's a big music conference. It's the biggest music conference in the world. And rates go through to like $1,000 a night on most of the places in Miami. So we figured if the developer we got him to give us like 5 weeks for free as build out time, that we could if we were really good, we could get the place furnished in 2 weeks. And that'll give us the other 2 weeks to sell through Spring Break and Ultra, and that'll give us enough money to pay the first month's rent, or the second month. And that's kind of what we did. We figured out a way to like really hustle, and we would start with one whole floor and furnish the whole floor. And as we were finishing that floor, we already had pictures and everything on the platform of one unit. We just duplicated those units. And hold on one second, because this computer is running long.
No problem.
All right. Yeah, so we got real good at furnishing this place real fast, and we were able to rent it and make enough money to pay the rent, which is $140,000. And that place became quite successful, and that's why we were really heavily invested, because the place was super nice, and there weren't too many places like that available in Miami. And brand new place with a pool and all the amenities. So it's like a whole hotel that we actually own.
Got it. Are you still running that operation, that property?
No, that's like the one that they backed out on us just after COVID. But we ran it for almost 3 years.
Okay, so backed out, they just said we got to terminate this lease, and
Yeah.
Did they have to sell it themselves to just liquidate or something, or what happened?
They gave us $250,000 to move out.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
Well, because we have a lease. So as the lease itself has triggers, recession triggers and things like that. And one of the triggers was national emergencies. So if we couldn't operate, there was no payments because the hotel couldn't be open. So and the developer was good with that in the first shutdown, because we were able to donate the entire use of the entire place to the health system. And somehow he set that up, so I'm sure they paid him somehow. But when the second shutdown came, there were no more health systems for him to run the same scheme. So he just couldn't, he didn't know how many more months that was going to go on for. So he basically figured it was better to pay us to move and to try to fill the place up with tenants.
Okay. Interesting. So you recommend that someone would start locally? It might be a silly question, but if I want to start an Airbnb arbitrage business, would local be the way to go, or just kind of anywhere in the country that has opportunity?
Well, if I was starting again, I would always first look as close as possible to where I am. That way you could learn the business, because now I could operate in other cities and stuff because I have a system in place. And but if you've never done it, I mean, you're going to have to run a lot of the show yourself. You're not going to have a whole bunch of staff. So locally is the way to start this, and then you could, once you get your operation working, then you could consider doing other cities, other states, and things like that, or other countries.
How common is that to do other countries?
Quite common, actually. My partner in Tampa, he's operating one of the best Airbnbs in Costa Rica.
Huh.
So he's running it from Tampa, and the place makes quite a bit of money.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I guess if you have the right operation set up.
Yeah, like there, you need to have like somebody local that could kind of run the show for you and not scam you. So that's so, and there's like there's a currency arbitrage there because the cost of goods and services there are so much cheaper. So like a housekeeper there to clean that whole house only charges them like $20 US, and he's charging like $500 a night for this house. So he's making a great spread because the labor costs are cheaper.
Huh. That's really interesting. I didn't think about that because like someone's booking it that's I guess a European or a American that's used to paying those Western prices.
Yeah.
Huh.
Plus, the place is fairly unique. It's a glass house in the middle of the jungle. So it's another one of those kind of experiences that people would pay that type of money for. Plus, then they offer other amenities that are like they would, because labor's so cheap, they're able to like get you a private chef and like have like you can have all your meals catered there while you're there and all this stuff, and it costs him very little, and then he charges them like top dollar for those type of services.
Sort of ancillary revenue add-on service there.
Yeah. Same thing, like he provides like a car and all these other things that you can add on over there, and people love it.
Okay, that's very interesting. So I want to get a little bit more into the Turo stuff before we go. Is that the same principle where are you just like buying a car on a 5-year lease and then you got your monthly payment and you're trying to lease that out on a daily basis at a higher rate?
Same exact thing. Basically, you get a lease or a loan, and you put it on the platform. And if you have a $500 a month payment, if the car's worth $100 a day or something, all you need is 5 nights, and then you either have a free car, and then you just got to figure out how many more nights you could fill in order to make a profit. And the Turo game, one thing that I do have to say is like, I have an advantage because of how many years I was in the car business. It seems like you make money when you buy a car. It's a secret. Like you have to know how to buy the car right, because a lot of my cars, since I'm from the car business, I'm flipping out of cars now all the time. So I'll tell you, like a couple of weeks ago, I sold my Tesla, and I had it on the platform for a while, 4 months or something. And I was able to not only make that profit, but because those cars I'm constantly looking at my values, my car had gone up in value. So I was able to sell it for $14,000 more than I paid for it. Plus I made the revenue. So the secret is also in how you buy those cars. And I've been able to pull that off with a few other cars, Jeeps. I've had like 5 Jeeps now on the platform, and I've made money on all of them on the nightly and then on the flip.
That's really interesting. I have a friend that's had experience doing that. He buys cars from auto auctions for a used car dealership. So are you using auto auctions, or what's the strategy there?
Well, there I'm doing a lot of loans. The Tesla was actually a lease, but I didn't think I would make that kind of money like on a flip on it until I started seeing like the values had like continue to go up. There's just very few of those cars available, and that same thing happened with the Jeeps. Like I started noticing that Jeeps, and I wound up like for Turo, I bought like 7 Jeeps, and most of my Jeeps like now I have 3 left. Any other ones that I saw, the value was just like in relation to the nightly rate is just going up so much. I'm like, well, I rented this car for $100 a night for 3 months, and now I can make 10 grand. Like, it's just like a no-brainer. Plus, it's good for my credit because I just, like now I've paid off 7 cars in 4 months or something. Because you can sell a car if you have a payoff on it. And I know a few, like a lot of my cars, I'm actually selling them to wholesale dealers. So the wholesale values are going up so much that wholesale dealers are willing to give you top dollar just to have inventory.
Yeah, I've heard that. What's causing that? Just these spikes, rampant spikes in car prices?
It's the microprocessor shortage. So they're not building enough cars. So and this is going to be a problem for a few years. So cars are going up in value. Like those Jeeps, for example, they're worth more than original, like an 18 or 19 Jeep is, which with an original sticker price of $33,000 is worth 40 grand now. So they're worth 7,000 more as a used car. It's a few years later than when they were new cars. So it's just kind of a ridiculous. I don't think that's going to go on forever. I'm sure there'll be a correction at some point. But if you're smart and you take the time, I mean, I was able to source a bunch of different Jeeps from just different dealers, and I would go like one of them. I'm like, I lived across the street. Somebody was asking for like 20 grand more for a car than the other guy right across the street. So I bought it from the guy who was 20 grand cheaper because he had that car in his inventory a longer time, so he had bought it cheaper, and then he was trying to like just flip out of it and make a couple grand. So he wasn't trying to make 20 grand on it. So that's how you get those shifts in the market, and you can make that spread.
Okay, so you're not actually buying from auto auctions, but other dealers and just seeing which one's got the cheaper option.
Yeah, just if you've been in the car business as long as I was, I know a lot of people, and I know how to buy a car, and I could shop around. I have time sometimes, so I could not buy it. It's a different purchase than somebody who's emotional about a car, and this is their vehicle. Like me, I'd be like, well, if I don't buy it, I'll buy another one, and it's a way different thing. So it's hard for them to like if you see, look at all these things here, like these are all different cars. Like this is like a dealer I sell a lot of cars to, so I run my cars through there every few months to see where my values are, and then I could game plan accordingly.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I don't know if this has ever happened in history. It's typically cars are depreciating. Vehicles.
You usually lose your ass on these cars.
The second you drive them off the lot, right?
Yeah. Like when I saw that type of equity in that Tesla, I was astonished.
Huh.
The same thing happened. I bought a Ferrari, and it actually ended up going up $35,000 in value.
Okay.
So it was like, well, yes, I'm selling my Ferraris.
Yeah, just lock in that value, right? Lock in the equity. You can't just.
Well, yeah, like remember, like if there's that much spread, there's no reason to take the risk. When you have a car out on the road, it could be crashed or something. So if you're all of a sudden you're making like a huge windfall like that, you have to like sell it and let the other guy worry about that if they're going to rent it themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That makes me wonder then, so if I was like starting out building my little portfolio of Turo cars, my fleet, then it seems like it'd be better to do it on leases because the repairs will be done by the company leasing it to me. Is that right?
You can purchase it. Like I try to buy fairly new cars, if not brand new, fairly new, like a year old. And I either lease or buy. Leases, I've had good luck with some of my leases. You got to be careful though now, because a lot of the lease companies are figuring out a way to lock you in where you can't sell your car. It's like a new thing that they're all coming out with. Like you have to sell it back to the originating dealer, which is like a new clause that they're putting in their contracts. But these guys at auto buy, because they're like middlemen. I sold my 4Runner a few days ago, and like Toyota is one of those brands. That car was a lease, and like you can't sell it to a non-Toyota dealer. So like, and like I had gone to Toyota, and Toyota, like since they know about that little that lock-in contract deal, they try to like kind of hit me a little bit lower than I knew the car was worth. And I'm like, well, I told them I know my guys at Auto Buy. They know how to how to get you out of these things. And that's another car that sign and drive. I rented it for 7 months, and so I made at least 10, 11,000. I didn't make that huge of a spread. Like I made 1,000 over my payoff, but I also didn't give any money down. So like at that point, like I basically I knew I would be kind of breaking even, and I'm like, that's it. This is a good time. I could go out and get another new car and start the because remember, mileage is what you don't want. Like you don't want a bunch of high mileage cars in your fleet. So you have to kind of figure out how to flip out of them. And that car in like 7 months already had 12,000 miles. So you know, it's on its way to, you know, being a high mileage car. So you know, it's time to figure out a way to get out.
Okay. But like, unlike Airbnb arbitrage, you definitely don't want to tell the lease company that you're going to be putting it on Turo, right?
No, that would be a violation. Like,
Yeah.
and you definitely, that's kind of a gray area. So that's a don't tell type of scenario, right?
Yeah. But I think the benefit there is that cars are very homogenous, whereas every single piece of real estate is unique and different. And so it's easy to identify that's my house versus that's my car. Well, wait a minute. I'd have to like go there and look at the VIN number and really determine.
Well, and that's what I heard a few people have actually had some problems with that because one of the loan companies or lease companies, I think Ally, they were like going through the Turo platform and like looking up people's license plates because some people weren't covering their license plates up, and they repossessed some cars from people that had their cars listed for rent because it directly violated. Like they're one of the only companies that actually have like a direct like rule, no rental on their contract. So, but what I've heard now, like BMW is actually like okay with it, and a few other brands are starting to come around to the idea. So as long as you know, you don't see a large number of defaults because people took on too many cars or something, and like the banks get burned, I doubt that they're going to be too bad.
Okay. Yeah, I've only like rented from Turo. I haven't actually posted a vehicle on there. So do you have to post your VIN number or license plate or anything, or is it?
Well, you have to put it into the system, but you could actually like in your pictures, you don't have to show your license plate. And that's how these banks had kind of found out about these cars. Is they were just trolling the platform and looking at tags.
Got it. And so you just kind of disclose that license plate to someone that's already booked it and say it's,
well, the person doesn't even see it. It's just an internal thing with Turo. And I'll tell you something, you could put anything because sometimes I didn't know my tag and I just put JJJJ and the system doesn't care. So.
Okay. Interesting. So it's not even like beneficial to put it in. It's actually like detrimental potentially.
Yeah. It could be.
Especially if there's ever any lobbying and some law passed that says, hey, Turo, you have to turn over all that data.
Yeah.
Can you be fucked, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. Speculating here. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but you know, like a lot of these really good businesses, sometimes the loopholes close because of ridiculousness. So like the 1986 tax overhaul in real estate, big tangent, but you know, very interesting. Like a bunch of like lawyers and doctors, other folks investing in these big multifamily syndications, they were able to use all these losses to offset their W-2 income. And back in the 80s, you could do that. So it's like you're paying almost no tax for being like a passive investor. And so they covered all that shit up because they had some lobbying against it. And, you know, got to protect the little guy who's working hard, paying all the taxes.
And these rich guys are not paying any.
Exactly. Yeah, it still goes on, you know, but
there's still ways, there's still things you could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I pay less tax now than I did when I was a W-2 employee. That's for sure. So
yeah. I mean, I know everyone reads it, and it's still so true. Like one thing that stands out in Rich Dad Poor Dad is the W-2 is just not scalable, because your expenses scale with your income. And so you're always making that same margin. You're never really getting ahead. So yeah,
that is
totally.
the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Making 400 grand a year W-2, you're paying stupid money to Uncle Sam. Like I brought in, I think, a little bit over $3 million last year, and my total tax liability was only like $3,000. So I mean, because of the business I have has a lot of expenses, and when you're making that kind of money as a W-2 employee, you get subject to the minimum alternative tax. It doesn't matter how much you write off; there's still a tax rate that you have to pay regardless of your write-offs.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting too. That's a conversation I plan to have with this tax strategist CPA about that, because I know some people will set up S corps when they're having their own business, and then the W-2 themselves, which makes things easier, but maybe, I don't know. I'm not an accountant, so I don't know.
It could be tricky.
Yeah.
I pay myself a small W-2 because what's the law? Reasonable for your profession or something like that. So I'll use what's reasonable.
Right. Yeah.
It's $400 a week.
Okay.
That's reasonable, and that's what I W-2 myself.
Okay. Cool. Back to the Turo stuff. Is there a similar bottleneck in terms of like the housekeeping where someone's got to reset that vehicle before it's leased out again?
Yeah, that's that. So when I got the first few cars, it was new. So me and my wife were just and we're back to where we were in the beginning. We were both just kind of cleaning all these cars, and we got lucky because by our house there's like this membership car wash. So you pay like $39 a month per car, and you vacuum it real quick yourself, and then it's just like a drive-through. So, and it's only a couple blocks from the house, so we just kind of resetting the cars that way. Until we got to like 9 cars, and then it's like, man, we're spending the whole day of cleaning cars. We got to find someone. So we found someone who's just doing it kind of hourly for us. And the thing is that this Turo business, the other thing is like most of the cars are like delivery to the airport or something, and people pay a fee for it, but it's time consuming. So if you're like I can't spend my whole day dropping off cars at the airport. I have a business to run, So I don't mess with it. I have 2 guys now, and they just run my cars for me, and I don't even think about it that much anymore.
Okay. Are they like part-time workers paid hourly?
Hourly. They're actually the sons of one of our housekeeping supervisor. She has two like college-age sons, so they have a little free time during the day, and 4 or 5 hours a day they can make $12 an hour or something, and that's like plus they get to hang out and drive nice cars, and they like that. So
okay, cool. Yeah, I remember when I first graduated from college, I didn't have a job, so I was a valet parker at the W Hotel in Austin, and that was pretty fun, driving some Maseratis and Bentleys and stuff.
So there you go. Same thing.
Yeah. Very nice. All right. So the Happy Travel Services Miami, that business, is that like a travel agency at all, or is it purely?
No, it's my Airbnb company. So that's where I run all my Airbnbs through, and that's the name. Like now in Tampa, we called it Happy Travels Tampa. We have an LLC up there for my Tampa unit. So it's just a name that I came up with a few years ago. People seem to like it.
Okay. Do you have to have do you feel like you have to have a physical office?
No, not for this.
Okay.
Like people don't typically come out to the office or do anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't seem like there'd be a need for it. Just curious. I thought I saw like a Google Street View of your business in Miami, so I wasn't sure if you had an office.
Well, the office that I do have is not really for customers. It's in one of my buildings, and that's kind of where we run our housekeeping company through. So there's an office there, but it's not really for customers. It's a housekeeping office.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think we've covered most things. Before we started recording, though, you said you have like a course or some mentorship program. Did you want to talk about that?
Yes. Yeah. So I have a video course to teach you how to do the whole business, the Airbnb and Turo business. And we also do a one-on-one mentorship for people who want to get involved. Like now I have something like 100 mentees from all over the world, and they're having a lot of success. Plus, what's unique about it is I'm unlike a lot of people that are doing mentorships, since I am able to get a lot of real estate from different developers. I've been able to kind of like do a sublet of the sublet. Like I basically give you a unit within one of my portfolios, and I become your landlord in the deal, and I make a little spread on it. And but you get your shot at like doing your first Airbnb unit and seeing if it's actually something you want to do.
All right. That sounds really practical, really good, and turnkey. So,
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we call it, the Turnkey Program. So,
okay.
so that's exactly what it's called. And it's good for people who, let's say you live in Atlanta and you have a career of some sort, but you wanted to like pursue this Airbnb thing, but you also, it'll cost you money to come and set a whole Airbnb up. The way we're doing it is we give you a fully furnished, complete Airbnb along with the pictures, and you run it yourself, and you just pay the rent to me. And that program's had quite a bit of success.
Okay. But if I was or subleasee, would I have to also get the housekeeping and stuff just to get those reps in, so an experience of managing that property?
Oh, and in those cases, they're actually taking advantage of my scale, because I have units, like a lot of units in those buildings, so they pay a percentage of what the housekeeping costs are, and it helps them, be kind of hands off. Basically, what they're managing is their customers, and all they have to do is kind of put their unit on a schedule for my housekeeping team to clean it. So it makes it quite easy.
Okay, so it's almost like a passive investment vehicle.
Yeah, it is. For a full turnkey furnished unit, we charge people $22,000, and basically that gives you, first of all, you have a unit, so and now you can see if this is something for you, and if you want to continue like investing and getting more units yourself, or like a lot of the guys that have done it love it, because some of those units are like bringing in $250 a night. So they're getting their return fairly quickly, and they're learning all the experience of running that business, and they didn't have to go out there and hustle up the unit.
Okay, got it. So if I wanted to learn more about this or contact you, is there a website that people can go to, or how's that work?
The best way to contact me is on Instagram. I'm Brickle Cigars on Instagram, and there you'll see I do a lot of free content on how to set up Airbnbs, how to acquire them, all the steps needed, and there's the link to my courses, my mentorship, and the Turnkey Program. And that program, when you join any of those different programs, like my mentorship, you get the course included, and the Turnkey Program, you get the mentorship and the course included, obviously.
Okay. Yeah, I'll include that in the show notes, but if someone wants to write that down, I didn't catch that. You say Brick Wall Cigars?
Brickle, BRICKELL Cigars, Brickle Cigars on Instagram.
Okay.
And that's a nod to my old cigar shop that cost me everything.
Oh, okay. Got it. Very cool. All right. Well, I really appreciate you jumping on here. I think this episode was very helpful to shine a new light on a more creative side of things. So I think this was very interesting. Thanks for taking the time to do it.
I had a great time.
Good. Perfect. Well, we'll do it again soon.
All right. Bye.
All right. All right. That's another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to leave a review and subscribe on whatever channel you're using to listen or watch these episodes. And also be sure to go to scalablerealestateinvesting.com, scroll to the bottom, and fill out the form to sign up for our email. And you could also reach me directly at mason@scalablerealestateinvesting.com. That's MASON at scalablerealestateinvesting.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me to either partner on deals or even be considered to do your own episode on this podcast. Thanks again, and have a great day.